From the very beginning of human civilization, we have always fought for our survival or glory, and sometimes even fought for the wrong cause. Though back in the days, wars were part of everyone's life, and war heroes were respected by the general people. For fighting against one another and to prove their strength, humans always have done immense work to get the purest and most advanced forms of technology when it comes to weapons. People often get astonished by the weapon technology of the 21st century, but barely they know about those ancient hardcore megatoys and vehicles which produced havoc on the battlefield and ripped off the rivals. Today we're going to share information in brief about 5 such high-tech ancient vehicles ridden into the war. Number 5. The Beast of Hellenistic Era. Ships have always been the sirloin steak piece of any war. A big beast like ships doled up with high-tech machines that can rip off the defense system of any force, and even they can bring down the aircraft too. Yes, we are talking about carrier ships, enormous and gigantic ships that can carry fighter jets and necessary troops. Many of us cannot even think a ship like this can be used back in the 4th century BC, widely known as the Hellenistic era. But that is a fact. When it came to naval warfare, they did not hold up anything, and the bigger the better was their motto in this case. How big those ships were? According to some of the researchers, those were 430 feet long giants with a vast amount of architectural designs on them, and about 7,000 troops could be easily fit on them. That means you could have set a whole football field on those ships. The reason behind building such giants was to carry as much troops as they can, and also it helped them to outfit themselves with catapults and ballista. Before these biggies, ships that were roaming in the Mediterranean Sea used the technique of ramming other ships with bows. This technique helped them to rip off rival boats, and eventually they got sunk in the sea. Maneuverability for slamming declined with size, so the purpose shifted to using the catapults to bring down the rowers of the enemy ship, basically making it cripple. They superintended themselves out of this impasse by building ships even larger and adding more rowers. Those ships could hold many more men than any of the modern-day aircraft. After the Battle of Actium, Roman power and dominance were persistently established on the sea. If you have seen one of their majestic and deadly warships, you would have known they could drown anything into the sea ground standing against their way. Sometimes the emperors took one of those to roam around in the sea as they were confident enough about their safety. With more than thousands of slaves and rowers standby, you could have also ruled the sea without any hesitation. Number 4. Suicide airplanes. Have you ever heard of suicide bombers? Those are the most insane and brutal kind of terrorists who sacrifice their own life for the worst reason possible. Some people cannot believe the fact that an individual can tie up a grenade with himself and let it blast while being attached to him. Lads, if this is not rubbish and scary enough, I have something for you. There were these suicide planes with whom a person had to go and give his life without having a second chance. I mean, what kind of mentally disturbed person could have made this kind of weapon? To give you an idea about these scary killing machines, these mini airplanes could dive at 650 miles per hour on the target point, equipped with 2,650 pounds of wrecking explosives. These planes were just as big as a car, and its wings were made of plywood and fabrics were used to cover them. They tried to keep the plane as lightweight as they could. Now comes the cherry part. There was no landing gear or even any kind of ejector seat. Now why it is called a suicide plane. After having its pilot fused inside its cockpit, the Oka would be taken into battle by another plane and then discharged in its triple rocket-powered craziness to rain down guesstimating collisions. The pilot was giving their lives when they decided to be on the plane. They were brainwashed by their seniors, and the sweet basket of nationality was given to their hands that eventually made them do the unbelievable. Another thing to mention, those planes were the outcome of not 1 or 2, but 3 rockets. Ridiculously, the Japanese force-fired almost 850 Okas against their enemy, but they could not destroy more than 3 ships in all together. Number 3. Big fat airships. From 1931 to 1935, humans witnessed something bigger than thoughts floating on the sky. Whenever we think of the term airships, we often picture the floating aircraft from the Marvel Avengers series. But here we are discussing such giants that have been there on the sky, giving our beliefs a hard punch. In 1931 and 1935, 2 airships made their start as airships. The first one is U.S. Akron, and the second one is U.S. Macomb. Till today, we have been introduced to three kinds of airships: flexible, that had no structure; semi-rigid, built with metal structure; and rigid, an outer metal structure that is covered by cloths. Airships are a product of French invention, but it was developed by a German engineer named Earl Ferdinand. When the First World War began, the U.S. force thought of using those aircraft as weapons. The U.S. claimed 2 of the 3 aircraft from Germany. Americans built one airship on their soil, and they used them on their service in 1923 as the U.S. Shenandoah. For your knowledge, those big fat giants could carry or transport 5 lightweight aircraft within them. This gives an idea of how massive the creation was. When it comes to competing, U.S. airships were ahead of the others. U.S. airships were driven by helium gas, while the others were driven by hydrogen gas that is much heavier than helium. And another fact that supported American airships was that, at the time, a huge reserve of helium was discovered. Akron floated in 1931. It was a 240 meters long giant. Akron's structure was built with a lightweight aluminum structure that helped it to fly easily. It had 8 engines within to run and could travel up to 11,000 kilometers with a speed of 55 knots. Another one was U.S. Macomb. It started its journey for the first time in 1931, but the luck of Macomb was not so good. On February 12, 1935, Macomb plunged into the Bay of Monterey south of San Francisco. 74 people died and only 3 people survived from that crash. Number 2. The Flying Deadpool. The XP-79B was an innovative American aircraft developed at the end of World War II. It was the first American rocket-powered aircraft to ever accomplish flight and was proficient in escalating over 4,000 feet per minute. It was a revolutionary creation and success for the American Air Force. Aerial Marvel reinforced it with magnesium plates, which gave the beast aerodynamic superiority and premium and smooth quality flying experience. The next thing that they did is pretty much insane even in the eyes of the Air Force itself. Some of the utterly psycho engineers and pilots brought the idea of ramming into other fighter planes. Yes, you have heard that right. They went for arranging wrestling between the jets on the air. Just think about it. 2 massive, powerful jet fighters are ramming into each other and fighting like the wrestler does in the TV, while both the planes tearing off and throwing each other in the air. Something very unusual and also completely dangerous. The XP-79B was a rocket-powered, good-looking boy with the ability to break into the enemy's den and destroy any object which stands against it. Most of all, the speed it had was immeasurable. Jet technology was getting advanced at the time, and 79B was lucky enough to get all the advancement within itself. Anyway, the 9,000-pound bad boy could not fulfill the expectation of ramming. Then America thought otherwise about using the XP. They installed rockets that contain nitric acid. People who don't know what nitric acid is and its capability, it is very toxic and so corrosive that some concerned countries have banned the use of nitric acid in the battlefield. Plans were given to put in motion to outfit the XP-79B with actual guns before the project was scrapped entirely. So actually, American Air Force was dealing with a poisonous and mad berserk machine that could have done damages like never before. Somehow they went out of their plan and closed it off, as the Chief of the Air Force was not much happy with all these. Number 1. The Human Torpedo. You have heard of the human plane before, which was created by the Japanese Air Force. Now here we present to you the story of the human torpedo. Yes, you heard it. Well, I know torpedoes are something like a cigar-shaped object which is used by a submarine while attacking enemies. But this one is slightly different. At first glance, you will think of it as a twin torpedo, because another one is attached to it on its own. That one is the actual torpedo. Now the question can raise, what is the use of the first one then? Here you go. The first one was used for the pilot. Yes, a human pilot to drive the torpedo. In their defense, they said that these human-navigated torpedoes will help them to hit the target more efficiently, and thus they will be successful in their mission without spending much. One thing they seem to forget is the security of their pilots' lives. First of all, the upper section, which was created for the pilot, was very congested, and with the glass being locked, hardly they could have taken any oxygen. Second, when running for the targets, those torpedoes went slightly under the surface level of the water, and water constantly washing over the dome made it hard for the pilots to navigate properly and made it impossible for them to see through. The commanders of the force then advised pilots to attach navigators with their watches. They did. Finally, the worst scenario came in front of all: the leggings in engineering. After all the disturbance, when finally the drivers tried to pull off the torpedo on targets, their machine hot-lagged and many of them blasted on the spot. At the final report, it was said that over 70 men died when pulling off the trigger, whereas only 4 ships were down. It was one of the embarrassing and truly horrific ideas made by the Nazis. The world has experienced thousands of wars. Humans have always been into brawls with each other from the very beginning of civilization. The irony is, no structured and planned wars happen when we are uncivilized. War can be never expected or granted by people who are mentally stable and do not want this earth to turn into a hell of havoc and blood. From high-tech ancient vehicles to objects falling from the sky, our world is fully equipped with some amazing aspects. And yes, you heard it right, there was an odd phenomenon witnessed of objects falling from the sky. To know more, click here.